Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Officials considering whether COVID rules should be tightened in England as other countries in Europe tighten travel restrictions. 35-year-old Gabriel Boric to become Chile's youngest ever president. Plus, Philippines super typhoon ride death toll surges to at least 375. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shobowale. Leftist candidate Gabriel Boric has won Chile's presidential election to become the country's youngest ever leader. In what was expected to be a tight race, the 35-year-old former student protest leader defeated his far-right rival, Jose Antonio Cast, by 10 points. Mr. Boric told supporters he would look after democracy, promising curbs on Chile's neoliberal economic model. He will lead a country that has been rocked in recent years by mass protests against inequality and corruption. Mr. Boric's victory prompted celebrations on the street of the capital, with the supporters waving flags and honking car horns. In a speech, Mr. Boric said he was taken on the job with humility and a tremendous sense of responsibility, vowing to firmly fight against the privileges of a few. And a Hong Kong leader, Carrie Lam, has defended the low turnout in an overhauled Patriots-only legislative election. The turnout of 30.2%, about half that of the previous poll in 2016, was seen by pro-democracy activists as a rebuke to China after it imposed a broad national security law and sweeping electoral changes. Almost all of the seats were taken by pro-Beijing and pro-establishment candidates, some of who chaired on stage at the vote counting center and chanted guaranteed win. Lam, who will visit Beijing this week for her annual report to state leaders, said the document was a timely rebuttal of criticism of the elections by foreign governments and media. And our medical officials say at least one person was killed during protests in Khartoum against Sudan's military coup on Sunday. The health ministry has also confirmed that more than 100 others were injured. Hundreds of thousands of people staged protests on Sunday in Khartoum. They faced volleys of tear gas and stun grenades from security forces. At least 45 people have been killed during protests since the October 25th coup. That's according to officials. Activists have accused security forces of using live bullets and tear gas to disperse the rallies, assaulting protesters and stealing their personal property. It also said they encircled hospitals and fired tear gas at the entrances. The Ethiopian military has regained control of the historic town of Lalibella from Tigrayan rebels. The move comes amid an announcement by the Tigray People's Liberation Front that it's withdrawing from all areas in the Amhara and Afar regions. The TPLF said it took the decision to clear the way for a peaceful resolution to its conflict with the government. The conflict has caused a massive humanitarian crisis, with international mediation efforts having so far failed. It's unclear when the military retook Lalibella, but Deputy Prime Minister Demeke Mekonnen Hassan visited the town in Amhara on Sunday. Lalibella, famous for its rock-hewn churches, which date back to the 12th and 13th centuries, was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978. And the UN Refugee Agency says intercommunal clashes that erupted in Cameroon's far north region in the past 2 weeks has driven at least 100,000 people from their homes, although the real number may be much higher. UNHCR said it estimates that more than 85,000 people have fled into neighboring Chad in recent days, with at least 15,000 Cameroonians have been forced from homes inside their country. Since humanitarian access in the area is very limited, these totals may be much higher.
Fira sida macet amma be warada harba ajamani ke hallani galla hasa wa hallani.
Chad is home to nearly 1 million refugees and internally displaced persons, and Cameroon to more than 1.5 million refugees and IDPs.
Fira sida macet.
I was injured in the head by a machete and in the back with knives. After 3 days in the bush, I was able to cross the Lagan River to reach the site of Unduma.
Along with the authorities, UNHCR, other UN agencies and humanitarian partners are rushing to deliver life-saving assistance. The agency has declared a Level 2 emergency and is rapidly scaling its operations to assist affected people in Cameroon and new refugees in Chad. UNHCR said refugees are in dire need of shelter, blankets, mats and hygienic kits. Some are being hosted by local communities, but most are still sleeping in the open and under trees.
We attach a wristband to each individual so that we can distinguish them from the local population. We distribute hot meals, build latrines, and have mobile clinics deployed to the sites for first aid.
In far north Cameroon, security forces have been deployed and disarmament operations are underway. While few incidents have been reported during the past week, tensions remain high. UNHCR and Cameroonian authorities have been leading reconciliation efforts, organizing a forum in early December, during which community representatives committed to end the violence. But without urgent action to address the root cause of the crisis, UNHCR says the situation could escalate further. The agency called for the support of the international community to assist the forcibly displaced and reiterated its call for reconciliation to end the violence so that people can return home safely.
Police say at least 375 people are now known to have died after a powerful storm struck the Philippines on Thursday last week. Super Typhoon Raya, with winds of about 195 kilometers per hour, sent some 400,000 people running for safety when it hit the country's southeastern islands. At least 500 people were injured and 56 others have been reported missing by local police. Rescue teams have described scenes of complete carnage. But establishing the scale of the losses is difficult as communication to a number of areas have been cut off. Heavy snow has caused disruptions in Turkey's mainly Kurdish southeast and eastern provinces, blocking roads and leaving motorists stranded. Video footages show drivers struggling to push their vehicles through snow drifts. Authorities say 30 drivers were rescued on Sunday and roads to 63 villages were shut because of the blizzard. The meteorology office say strong snowfalls will continue in southeastern and eastern parts of Turkey in the coming days. Malaysians displaced from their homes due to flooding caused by torrential rains have made desperate pleas for help amid an outcry from the public and lawmakers over delays in rescue efforts. More than 66,000 personnel from the police, army and fire department have been mobilized to help rescue people stranded by floodwaters and take them to shelters. Malaysian authorities say at least 8 people have been killed in the floods as heavy rainfall that started on Friday morning last week caused dozens of road closures and disrupted shipping. More than 21,000 people have been displaced from their homes. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that Lebanon needs proper accountability for the August 2020 Beirut port explosion. Well, he made this comment on the second day of a visit aimed at rallying international support for the crisis-hit country. His comments followed a meeting with Lebanese House Speaker Nabi Berri and a visit to the port, where he laid a wreath at a memorial for more than 215 people killed when chemicals stored at the port for nearly years exploded. Many Lebanese blame the blast on the corruption and dysfunction normalized by a political elite that has been in power since the end of the 1975 to 1990 civil war. Islamic countries have pledged to set up a humanitarian trust fund for Afghanistan, with millions facing hunger and harsh winters setting in. Pakistan's Prime Minister warned of chaos if the worsening emergency is not urgently addressed. The crisis is causing mounting alarm, but the international response has been muted, given Western reluctance to help the Taliban government, which seized power in August. Taliban officials have previously asked for help to rebuild Afghanistan's shattered economy and feed more than 20 million people threatened with hunger. Some countries and aid organizations have begun delivering aid, but the near collapse of the country's banking system has complicated their work.
Extraordinary session of the OIC Council of Ministers. My big worry is that unless action is taken immediately, and I mean immediately, because we've been saying this for now 2-3 months, unless action is taken immediately, Afghanistan is heading for chaos.
The conference has agreed, and it was required, to establish a humanitarian trust fund. 2, they've agreed, and we've all agreed, to launch a food security program for Afghanistan. 3, we collectively feel that we have to unlock financial and banking channels, because the economy cannot function and people cannot be helped without banking services. This is the beginning. Follow-up meetings would be required. One cannot feel complacent that we have done what was required. No. We have made the international community and the Ummah realize the magnitude of the challenge, how big a challenge it is. And now we will have to work further to actually alleviate the sufferings of the people of Afghanistan.
So to come on the program. Well, the race to Christmas begins as Santas dash through Venezuela's capital and Spain's La Palma for charity. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. The UK government is considering whether COVID rules should be tightened in England. According to reports, 3 options are on the table, including another lockdown or an 8 p.m. pub curfew. While we wait for news on that, let's get some updates on the COVID-19 situation around the world. The EU's drug regulator has approved use of the COVID-19 vaccine from US-based Novavax in people 18 years and older, paving the way for a 5th coronavirus shot in the region as the Omicron coronavirus variant spreads. Data from 2 large studies show the vaccine has an efficacy of around 90%. COVID-19 infections have broken records in parts of Europe in recent weeks, with governments and researchers scrambling to bolster defenses against the fast-spreading Omicron. Austria has introduced stricter travel restrictions at its airports and borders. Non-residents arriving in the country will now have to be vaccinated. and show a valid negative PCR test. Austrian passport holders and residents will be allowed in unvaccinated, but will have to go into a 10-day isolation until they're able to show a negative PCR test. Travellers from the United Kingdom entering Germany must have a negative test and isolate for 2 weeks, regardless of whether they've been vaccinated. Officials announced the new rules as it classified the UK as a virus variant area of concern, the highest COVID-19 risk level. German citizens and residents will still be allowed to enter from the UK. Thailand is considering reinstating compulsory isolation for foreign visitors due to concerns over the spread of Omicron. It comes as the Health Ministry reported the country's first case of local transmission of the coronavirus variant. Elsewhere, acting on Health Ministry recommendations, Israeli cabinet ministers voted to put the United States, Italy, Belgium, Germany, Hungary, Morocco, Portugal, Canada, Switzerland and Turkey on the no-fly list.
Yeah, I'm going to fly to Belgium, Antwerp, to my rabbi, and I'm very upset to see the airport here, no people, and the restaurant is closed, everything is closed here. It's not look good, but Israel, it's in a good place. It's not the corona. This morning it's only 350 people. In all the world, it's 1,000. I think the government make a good job, and I'm very happy.
The move comes amid rising coronavirus infections in Israel. It has so far recorded 134 confirmed cases of Omicron and 307 suspected cases. And over in the United States, the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases have exceeded 50.8 million, with the death toll surpassing 806,400. As the Delta variant continues to wreak havoc and the Omicron variant spreads fast in the country, officials say the U.S. is currently facing a severe epidemic situation and greater need for COVID-19 testing. Critics have pointed out that the current testing capacity for the U.S. is far from meeting the need. Well, joining us now for more on the situation is our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Maria Bird. Maria, I want to begin with the travel restrictions placed on the U.S. by Israel. What reactions is this getting in the country?
Yes, hello, Taniola. This is definitely getting a reaction, and I think a bit of surprise. I think the U.S. is used to being able to put the bans, but to have this ban by Israel. But we are very aware of how fast the Omicron variant is going through and infecting individuals across the country. We are very aware of the spike that is occurring. So, I think as much as it might be a surprise, I think that it's understandable due to where we are as a country with this new variant, and knowing what Europe has experienced with this spike, just a month ago, and still continuing to try to maintain and manage that spike. And so we are seeing what could be the case for us in the next few months if we're not able to get a handle on it. And also knowing this is putting our healthcare providers in great risk as well, which would obviously then definitely impact the care that people are able to receive if the infection continues to take a spike in the U.S.
And bearing all that in mind, as Christmas approaches, are authorities likely to impose more restrictions in the country to slow the spread of the Omicron variant? What are you hearing?
It is highly likely that we will begin to see some restrictions put in place. Now, the government has said they will not do a full shutdown as what was done last March, but it is not clear that that is definitely not going to be the case. We already have school districts that are beginning to move totally virtual until the end of January. We're beginning to see schools, even individual schools, closing down. So the school systems are beginning to take heed to what we're seeing as many outbreaks across our country. And then obviously some areas are even seeing larger outbreaks where whole communities are being impacted by this Omicron variant. I think the bigger concern right now is the Delta variant is still very rampant in the U.S., and that is the variant that is creating major concern, health concerns for many, and even unfortunately leading to some people's death. And so that is what I think many health professionals and scientists in the U.S. are trying to work to eradicate, even though that does mean the Omicron variant is traveling and being passed much faster. But people are seeing a much better survival rate with that as well. So the hope is that there will be no shutdowns. Obviously, the bill did not pass to put a mandatory mandate on vaccines. So that is going to be another hurdle. for many Americans, businesses, and the government to try to overcome.
You know, leaders around the world are kind of calling on their citizens to get the boosters now as a way out of the pandemic. Speak to us about the U.S.'s vaccination drive.
The U.S. has put a lot of effort and a lot of financial backing into vaccinations across the country. We know that there are states, as we know, Senator Manchin has basically said that he's not going to move forward with some of the bills that are being put in place. And we know that West Virginia is one of those areas that has lower vaccination rates. So unfortunately, we're finding kind of the middle of the country is having a harder time adopting the vaccine practices. But we're also noticing some of those regions are also seeing major spikes in COVID, in the COVID infection across those areas. So what we're going to probably begin to see is just more mobile drives. We're going to probably start seeing more community involvement. There's a lot of funding now for community organizations to be able to campaign and actually go out to the community door to door offering vaccinations. So that will be probably where we end up now that there's not going to be a mandate by the government that can be put in place.
All right then, Maria, thank you so much for the update.
Thank you for having me.
Well, speaking of vaccinations, Cuba has vaccinated more of its citizens against COVID-19, the most of the world's largest and richest nations, a milestone that will make the communist-run country a test case as a highly contagious Omicron variant begins to circle the globe. The island has vaccinated over 90% of its population with at least one dose, and 83% of the population is now fully vaccinated, placing it second globally behind only the United Arab Emirates, among countries of at least 1 million people, and that's according to official statistics compiled by Our World in Data. Well, what's Cuba's secret? While many of its neighbors in Latin America, as well as emerging economies globally, have competed for vaccines produced by wealthier nations, health officials in the country say Cuba vaulted ahead by developing its own vaccine. Infections and deaths from COVID-19 have plunged on the island in recent weeks, falling to less than 1% of their peak on August the 22nd, when fewer than half its citizens were vaccinated. Cuba has said its homegrown protein-based shots give upwards of 90% protection against symptomatic COVID-19 when offered in 3-dose schemes. However, Cuba has not yet published results of its large-scale clinical trials in peer-reviewed journals, nor has it submitted the documents required by the World Health Organization for approval of its vaccines. And finally on the program, hundreds of Santas have dashed through the streets of Venezuela as part of a 10-kilometer fun run. Clad in the traditional red jacket and hat, runners spread joy and Christmas cheer as they battle to hold on to their hats. This is the 5th Santa fun run in the capital and has become a popular event in the city's festival season. With last year's event cancelled due to the pandemic, runners were happy to be together again and spread joy to the world. It will also happen in Spain as thousands of people dressed as Santa Claus also took part in the charity run through Madrito to raise money for victims of the volcanic eruption on the Spanish island of La Palma. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.